Hello everyone, I'm here at London at Dr. Richard's Bandler, Kathleen Laval and John Laval, practitioner and master practitioner certification. And today we are with Kate Benson. She is the Director of Education of our society. So Kate, it's a pleasure having you here.
Thank you for inviting me.
And congratulations on your book.
Thank you.
So Kate, one of the first questions that I normally ask is, how did you get involved with NLP and especially with the society?
Okay. Well, I got involved with NLP back in the 80s. I did a little bit of NLP short course, was intrigued, tried a few things out, but didn't really sort of take it on board as a major life-changing thing until Richard Bandler came to the UK to deliver some trainings, and I saw a leaflet. I don't know why. I looked at it. I have to go on this course.
What did you do before?
Well, I was a teacher originally.
Okay.
I graduated in law. My subject was law. I was then a teacher of 16 plus, so
Okay.
young adults.
Yeah.
And by the time I came to do NLP, I was pretty good at what I did anyway. And by the time I was in my late 20s, I was training other teachers in some of the specialisms. I was quite at the leading edge in my field. And when I came to NLP, it wasn't so much it taught me a whole load of new stuff initially. It explained to me what I was doing that was working and why. And it also taught me to stop doing stuff that didn't work.
Yeah,
So I immediately or very quickly became much more elegant, because NLP is a model based on elegance.
The concept of elegance that we use, can you explain people,
Well,
please?
this means the concept of elegance is that you take the minimum amount of energy or effort to get the maximum change. So if you think about this in terms of teaching, what happens with most teachers is that they have a toolkit of stuff that works, so they don't know quite what's going to work with which kid.
Yes.
So they go in the classroom and I call it scattergun, and they scatter it all over the class and hope that something works. Well, that's a very inefficient way of working.
Yeah, it is.
Sure,
It's not their fault.
No, it's not their fault.
No.
It's because they don't know any differently. So what I discovered is that if you hone down your skills, found out really what worked well, and did more of that, and less of the stuff that didn't work, life gets easier. And teachers, more than any other group of people, want things that make life easier for them, because it's a tough call.
Yeah. In one of your videos, you have a lot of videos with a lot of people of our society. There was a question that kind of was 10 years ago, in which you told Richard, so you use NLP to teach NLP.
Right.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Well, that's really what I say when people say, how come you got into the field of education and NLP? One of the things that I asked a question one day. And it's true, I was my master practitioner, and I was there on my master practitioner, and I knew that this field had an application, but I just wasn't quite sure what it was.
Yeah.
Richard kept saying these things, and he kept saying things like, people aren't broken, they don't need fixing, they're uneducated as to how to use their minds. I'm thinking, this sounds really familiar. So I asked him, I said to him, Richard, I'm brave enough, and I said, how come you say that you can teach NLP really quickly because you use NLP to teach NLP, but we're not using NLP to teach everything else?
Exactly.
English, maths, geography, music. Today we saw the creativity strategies working.
Beautiful.
Kathleen's teaching the spelling. And he went, that, my dear, is a very good question. And he sort of gave me the job then. So I went off to figure out how, with his help, and then going into, and I'm more tenacious, he says, I go in, I take over groups, I borrow people, I borrow students, I practice wherever I can, to work out what the strategies were, and how we used NLP to teach anything else in the classroom. So sure, the strategies, it's also all the stuff you do using presuppositions to presuppose the success of your students, using the Milton patterns to make sure that they change their beliefs as they're learning. And so we use the whole of NLP just as you do when you're working one-to-one.
Yeah.
But we do it with groups.
That's great. I saw a video that you did that's like 30 minutes, and it's beautiful because you talk about the stages of the development of the brain in children, just before they're teenagers. But the other day I was reading a book, and they said something very, very cool. They said before the 7th or 8th birthday, since you were born, the kid's brain is normally in between alpha and theta. So hypnosis, we put people normally in theta, so that's why they are suggestible.
Well, that makes sense. I haven't read that research, but it sort of makes sense because that age, 7, 8, is, we call it, well, traditionally it's called the age of magical thinking.
Yeah.
So it's that age where when you believe, in England, if you believe something's going to happen, it's going to happen. So I don't know, you probably have similar rhymes. We have a rhyme that used to go to school saying, if you tread on a nick, that's like a crack in the pavement, you'll marry a stick and a witch will come to your wedding. Okay, so you have those little rhymes that, and the little rituals and things that reinforce or reassure children, and that's also can be quite scary sometimes. It can also be very magical and wonderful as well. So that makes sense because of the creativity of those little Einstein brains, where everything is possible. So I would be really interested in reading more about that.
Sure. It's the job of a biologist called Brian Lipton. His book actually is called The Biology of Belief. It's very cool. It's very cool. And one thing that it's very common for people that practice with other people, we have sessions, is terminology. The mother comes to you, says, Kate, my kid has been diagnosed with ADD, DDF, FBI, I don't know. Yeah, exactly. What's your opinion normally on your work, actually with children that you have worked so much on them, about that? Because it's kind of like people say it's true, some people say it's not true, people say if you teach the teachers to use all the representational system, you get more engaged. What's your opinion?
A lot of questions in that, really. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Diagnoses of learning, back up. There is no such thing as a learning difficulty.
Exactly.
There is a teaching difficulty.
Totally agree.
So what we have in terms of people's brains, all people's brains, is neurological diversity. So we have a whole spectrum of the way we're wired. And these labels just basically pick a chunk of a section of the diversity and say, we'll call that this. Yeah. And these are the traits of this group or this group. Now, there are times when labels can be helpful.
Yes.
I quite often meet people who they have a diagnosis of dyslexia, for example, and they say, oh, thank goodness, I thought I was just stupid. Well, there's no reason for anybody to think they're stupid anyway. You just haven't found the right strategy.
Totally agree.
So the labels, excuse me, we have people walking past. Just take a moment.
We're in a hotel, so it's okay.
So those labels can be helpful, but they don't give you anything to do. And that's the important thing.
Makes sense.
So for me, whatever the label is, and also the labels are so broad. So for example, with dyslexia, you will have visual processing difficulties, or auditory processing difficulties, or spatial processing difficulties.
Yes.
So that label doesn't tell me how you're having trouble processing.
Totally.
It just tells me that you've got a label stuck on you. So the labels can be helpful in a limited way. However, whatever the label is, what we do is teach to symptom. So I look at what somebody can and can't do. Exactly. The actual doing process, not what we call it. Yeah. Can they do this, this, and this? Can they not do this? And we look to fix the strategy. So then there's a number of different ways. Either they have no strategy at all, we give them a new one that works. They have one that works a bit, but not very well. Yeah. So maybe needs a new piece putting in it to make it work better.
We optimize it.
We optimize it,
Yeah.
or maybe it's so messy it needs tidying up, so we take some pieces out of it and streamline it that way. But whatever we do, we look at what's actually happening, what's actually the kid or the person can or can't do, and fix that or work with that. So I don't care what the labels are. And yet people come along, it's usually the opening line, oh, my child's, how do I help my child? He's got dyslexia. And my thing is, so where is it?
Exactly.
And a funny story, it's in my book, there's a little boy who goes into his teacher and says, I've got ADHD, miss. And the teacher says, where is it? And he goes, I don't know what you mean. And she says, oh, there it is. Give it to me. I'll put it under the desk and you can have it back later.
Beautiful.
And you know what? That kid calmed down. He learned he wasn't his syndrome. He wasn't his label. He could make choices.
Of course.
And
when we teach them.
When we teach them, yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. So it's very much the same process you use with any other sort, where if you go and you do some business coaching or you do some one-to-one life coaching, it's the same process. What is it the person wants to be able to do that they can't do? How do we help them get there? Same thing.
Yeah, because one of the things that it's very common, for example, where I work, it's in South America, and education is everything. Even with somebody, he has a phobia. He doesn't suffer from the phobia. He produces it. It's a strategy, inside, outside steps, and all that. So people get amazed when you can help a kid that when he writes backwards, and after you work with them, I don't know, it could be 45 minutes, it could be 3 sessions of 3 days, 1 hour, or 90 minutes, and suddenly they start writing right, or correctly. So when you work with these kids and you get these results, why is it, in your experience, why is it that people find it so difficult that it's so easy?
I know, it's baffling, isn't it? It's absolutely baffling. Well, it is really interesting.
It's like Richard would say, work of the devil.
Well,
Something like that.
I think sometimes there's a credibility gap in that people actually believe, especially in education. We have this almost like mindset that says learning must be a struggle, it must be hard, it must be long. And I remember when I was teaching NLP, because I use sort of like accelerated learning and NLP combined on my teaching excellence program, and I was teaching these people, and this teacher said to me, but that's accelerated learning. And he went, so that's not good? And he went, no, it's accelerated learning. Like it was like a bad thing. I said, is that not a good thing? That it's like learning, but it's faster? Does it have to be slow for it to be real learning? And that was his mindset. He believed that. And actually challenging it, he went, and started to think about it a little bit more. So I think there's a credibility gap, but it cannot be this easy. That's straightforward. So we have to get over that belief and demonstrate it is. So people think it's a trick.
Yeah.
People think it won't last.
Yeah.
They think it's going to somehow dissolve. So that's one of the things. The other thing that teachers seem to do is they won't leave stuff alone.
No.
So
it's like they want it back.
Yeah. So like recently I've been working in a school on a spelling strategy for the whole school.
Yeah.
So I went in, not NLP trained, so it's fair enough. They good, it's good they did this. So I went in and I taught the basic spelling strategy, in 6-8 steps with a poster with pictures on for the teachers to go in and do this. Then I went in and taught their classes so they could watch me do it, because then that's another piece of learning, and then they could have a go. And I kept going back in and checking, and the results were, as they always do, sky high in 3 weeks.
Amazing, yeah.
After 3 weeks, they plateaued, and even in some cases were dropping. One class they were still going up, the others were sort of levelling. One was not quite so good.
Yeah.
Kids weren't doing so well. Oh, well, what was happening? They were doing great, these kids. We teaching big words and small words. We were only teaching to spell what we call tricky words, which are the ones in English that don't conform to the rules. So it didn't really matter on length. That wasn't an issue. So I went in and I discovered that they just stopped doing one of the steps because they decided it wasn't necessary.
Imagine that.
And the step was that when they saw it in their mind, they had to write it down on a piece of paper. And they decided they didn't need to write it down. They could write it pretend on the desk. And I said, well, how is the kid supposed to check that the one in their mind is the same as one on the page?
How is it going to
if
match?
They can't look at it, how's it going to match?
Yeah.
Well, we just didn't think we'd waste that much paper. So sometimes they like stop doing stuff that's necessary, and other times they put stuff in that they don't need. Now, one of the things that you just mentioned in your multi-question intro a moment ago was about visual, auditory and kinesthetic representations. And do we teach multisensorily? Well, the answer to that is no.
Okay, cool.
There are again, that's an example of a scattergun. I don't know what's going to work for this kid, so I'll throw out a visual strategy, an auditory strategy, a kinesthetic strategy, and hope one of them fits.
Yeah.
But what we know is that some strategies, some processes require more of a visual element, others require more of an auditory element, some require all three.
Yeah.
So it's about precision. So the spelling strategy is the most effective, because all the spelling strategy is about consistency and conformity. So what you want is somebody to do something consistently. So a visual representation is much more efficient and effective for that than, say, an auditory one, especially in English. In Spanish, an auditory strategy is easier. There are so many variations in words. In Japanese, it's impossible to have an auditory strategy.
Yeah, of course.
So it depends on the language. So you find precisely what's necessary for that particular activity or task or learning that you want to do. So if you want to learn lists, you want to learn. I'm just happen to be looking at a map of the world over there, and I want to learn where the countries are. Then the sensible thing might be to have the map, and when I think about a country, for the country to leap out at me, or maybe the flag to leap out at me with the word written on. Or maybe I do want a fanfare as well, but I don't necessarily have to have everything in there, because there is a school of thought that says unless you visualize it, hear it, and feel it, or do it, it's not good learning. Sometimes that synesthesia is good. Sometimes it's not necessary.
Yeah, exactly. That's very cool. So we were talking just downstairs about the course that you give about teaching excellence. It's a 4-day course.
That's right.
Yeah. And we got a lot of people that are from the society that are master practitioners and trainers. So what will they learn in those 4 days with you?
Okay. Well, firstly, one of the important things to say is that although it's called Teaching Excellence, it's not a course that's just for teachers. Yeah. People will say to me, what age group do you specialise in? Or they'll ring and say, do you teach people who teach this age group? Well, the answer is yes. Learning is learning. The age group I teach is from 1 to 105.
Cool.
There is no limitation on that. If they're trainers, obviously they've done the training with the Society of NLP, which is a fabulous course and a fantastic course.
It is.
What the additional things they learn on teaching excellence, it almost should really be called learning excellence, because what we do is we take the emphasis away from you as the trainer and what you do, and have you paying much more attention to how the learning is happening. So the most important people in the room are the learners, and what's the process that's happening for them. Because what I say is that, people will say, I taught that last week. I hear trainers say, they say, I taught them that last week, but they just didn't get it. Kate says, if you taught it and they didn't learn it, you haven't taught it.
Yeah, exactly. You
because
didn't
the
deliver.
measure of whether or not you've taught it, meaning the communication is the response you get, is whether they learn it. So we put the emphasis very much on learning. That's the first thing. The second thing we do is we take the best of leading edge educational practice and pedagogy.
Okay.
And we meld that with the science of NLP, the art and science of NLP. So for example, in the educational field, there's something called Cobb's learning cycle.
Yeah.
Now, Cobb's learning cycle is translated in NLP terms into format Most people don't know they're the same, they come from the same root. So when we bring them back together again, there's all sorts of very cool learning we can do. And we can teach people to differentiate their learners in the classroom with the same activity. So we don't have to have 30 different lesson plans for 30 kids. We have one lesson which hits all of their needs in terms of diversity.
That's beautiful.
So that's, those are the sorts. And another example of that is we have in the educational field something called Bloom's taxonomy, which is a way of structuring questions to push the thinking into higher order reasoning. So rather than thinking about just knowledge and knowledge and comprehension, we're thinking about evaluation, analysis, synthesis, creating new things. That's the sort of thinking we want. Richard says the difference between remembering, which is like knowledge and comprehension, and thinking.
Yeah.
So we take Bloom's taxonomy, but we use the meta model.
Oh.
So by merging these two very useful tools together, we create really great thinking in our students.
That's
so those are the sorts of things, and lots more. There's 4 days of it.
Yeah. So we were talking too about the book that you co-wrote with Dr. Bandler, Teaching Excellence, and it's done the translation on Spanish.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I don't know when it's going to come out, but the translation is done.
Well, in South America we have 10 countries, so
yeah, I know,
that's
and
good news.
I'm sure it's going to be out very soon.
That's very cool.
Watch this space. We'll let you know as soon as it's ready.
Yeah, thank you. So if people want to contact you, how can they do it?
No, they can do so through my website, inquiries@meta-nlp.co.uk.
Yeah.
Or I'm on Facebook, Kate Regan Benson on Facebook, and I'd be happy to hear from anybody who has any questions.
Well.
And I hope to see you in South America before too long.
We'll make it happen. With Rocio, we're gonna team up and make something very beautiful so we can do a nice 4-day seminar.
Fantastic.
Okay.
That'd be brilliant.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.